Lo primero es que se requiere documentar, nosotros requerimos documentar qué empresas canadienses tienen intereses en los territorios indígenas o hacen presencia en territorios indígenas.
To begin with, to answer your question about this report, the Canadian Parliament under the Free Trade Agreement, we think a really good starting point would be just to start documenting where various Canadian extractive companies are active in Colombia, because that's not even information that is always forthcoming or transparently available.
Lo primero que hace el gobierno canadiense y el gobierno colombiano es negar la información sobre las empresas que tienen interés en esos territorios.
Often the first thing that we encounter from both the Canadian and Colombian governments is a denial of interests that certain companies might have in a particular area or zone or project, or we can't even get that information from them.
Esos datos son básicos para poder elaborar un informe respecto del comportamiento de las empresas canadienses en nuestros territorios y respecto del impacto del Tratado de Libre Comercio en los pueblos indígenas.
And that kind of basic information about which companies are operating where is kind of a no-brainer and fundamental to carrying out any kind of report or evaluation of what the impact of those companies has been in various communities, and furthermore, what impact the Canada-Colombia Free Trade Agreement is having.
En parte nuestra visita a Canadá obedece a tejer relaciones que permitan tener mucha claridad en la información y no venir acá o presentar un informe que no tenga datos contundentes, diría yo.
Part of my visit here is, and Onique's presence here in Canada right now, is to build relationships with various allies and partners, precisely to allow us to have more clarity, to get more information, which would allow us to in fact properly evaluate what the impacts are, because we recognize, just like everyone else does, that if we don't have the facts straight, we're not going to make a strong case.
Thank you both very much, Luis and Anne-Marie, for coming all this way to share your knowledge, with us. My name is Chris Moore, and I work with the United Nations Association in Canada, so we're very glad to see also the promotion of this declaration on this very important anniversary for it. And this issue of resource development is actually an issue that we're engaged on right now. We're actually in the process of designing an event. We're going to have it in Alberta called surrounding this idea of the new diplomacy of natural resources, about how both Canadian companies operating abroad and other companies operating within Canada, it takes on the tenor of actual diplomatic relations, how it's not just professional diplomats that are doing things that are basically practicing international relations. And as part of our research was about, a lot of this is about surrounding this idea of corporate social responsibility, how that is actually implemented, how it works well, and when it doesn't work well. So I guess I'd be curious on your thoughts are there particular companies that are actually where it's working very well? If so, what are they doing? If not, what could they be doing? Because the way, just like the real UN, where you kind of invite everybody to the table, whether you agree with them or not. We're trying to design an event and outreach where you bring everyone there, regardless of position, to find constructive solutions to collaboration. So I'm very interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, Anne-Marie has provided us with a very eloquent and personal environmental impact assessment. And I'm sure Luis probably could provide us with hundreds of them from Colombia, as Anne-Marie probably could from across Canada as well. What I'm interested in is these resource extraction projects are being driven by economic growth. And that economic growth depends on sources of energy, which are now fossil fuel energy, which is beginning to run out. And so, and it's complicated even further by the fact that the middle classes of India and China and Brazil and South Africa are also wanting to consume at the same level that we're consuming. And so we have a fundamental conundrum here in the sense that the kinds of specific, how we stop projects, how we mitigate around these projects is extremely important, so the work you're doing is really important. But at the same time, there's a macro picture that's linked in with consumption, not only of energy, but of things around the world that we're involved in as well, that our whole lifestyle depends on, personally, everyone in this room, and our governments and a lot of people are only talking about changing the kinds of light bulbs we use instead of changing the way we consume. And it seems to me that we have a lot to learn from Indigenous peoples who have a history of working with Mother Earth in a way that is much more coherent and much more respectful. And so I'm wondering what, I don't want to detract from the level of specific tackling of these problems. I'm wondering what both Elise and Marie have to say about that macro issue.
Okay. And the last question I take is the gentleman at the back there. So the first question was around corporate social responsibility examples. I was trying to think of some. I'm sure there are a lot of companies that strive to do things differently and better, but one thing I find that's missing out of the corporate social responsibility reports that happen is they tend to be from industry perspective. And the question I always have when the report, like Thompson Creek has the corporate social report that comes out. They are raving about what great things they're doing. They're talking with First Nations, but we're still being impacted. And so I think every company has kind of jumped onto the CSR model, and they say, well, as long as we do that, we're doing the right thing. Maybe if there was some kind of standard or some way that Indigenous people could give a report card back, then you might get a more balanced reporting, because from what I see, I feel that a lot of it is industry or government driven away from the communities that are actually impacted on the ground. So I can't give you any names or examples, but your event sounds like an interesting event. So do you want me to go through 3 of them? If you want to. Okay. Extraction, what I had was extraction development due to economic growth and consumption. That issue around just the reality that the world that we live in is, and hopefully I got your question right. That was a question we always got at home when we were putting up questions about the environment is well, you drive a car and you have a cell phone and you need all the stuff, the computers, and my daughter has a leap pad and all these things, right? And I think from my perspective anyways, I just always go back to what I learned from my elders, is that you always just take what you need, right? Is there opportunities to, like for Mount Milligan, for instance, they came and said, we want to take 60,000 tons out a day, and it's going to be a 15-year mine life. And so our community came together and said, 60,000 tons, what do you think? And one of our community members said, what if they took out 30,000 tons a day and expanded the life of the mine, expanded opportunities for jobs and more sustainable instead of short term? And we brought that back to them, and they said, no, we need to take as much out as fast as possible, and we need to get out of there. So sustainability wasn't there, and it wasn't a priority for them. They want to take advantage of the gold prices being high, and we just get caught in that cycle. And but from our perspective, we just thought that there was opportunities to develop a sustainable project. The question is instead of industry coming back saying, well, this is industry tested or this has been done somewhere else, to do things differently and outside the box. That includes Indigenous views. I mean, you know, small scale mines, looking at the use of chemicals. Like the company in our area said, we're not using cyanide, that makes us a good guy, but then they said, well, but we're using xanthate, and so when we said, well, what's xanthate and what's the impacts, and when we looked at it, it said, impacts the human, unknown, impacts to plants, unknown, impacts to animals, unknown. And Health Canada allows chemicals to be used like that until it's proven that they're unsafe, right? So that's, I mean, for me, we just take what we need from the land. We only, right now, I left home Monday night until 9 o'clock. I was in the smokehouse doing salmon. And salmon time at home, we only, how many do you need, you know, for me and my small family? Maybe 20 that could sustain us, and a few extra at my mom's just in case. But always just that's in your mind, is you only take what you need, and it's not about money. Last one, free entry. CSR begins at home. I'd like to see that I have that title. I'd like to look at that. I agree with that. That if I was invited to Ecuador in 2009, I believe. And the question I got from some of the Indigenous people there was, we were told by Canadian companies that all the Indigenous people in Canada love mining and are getting rich off mining, and is that true? And then the other question they said is, we're being told by Canadian companies that Canada can build green mines that doesn't impact your water and doesn't impact the environment. Is that true? And so I'm sure there's a lot of communities other than mine that you could go to talk about the impacts that companies are having here in Canada, and we need to start telling our stories, and we need to keep saying that in Canada things are not good. I went to Geneva in February, and one of the questions that we got from the committee there was, it can't be that bad, it's Canada. Right? Like there's this assumption that things are good here. And for some of the population it is, but we just have to keep telling our story and showing that things are not as good as the Canadian government and industry are putting out there, so that we need to change things here.